Sorry for the slight delay, but welcome to the March Ordinary Council meeting for the town of Bassendean. Firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge that as a council, as a community, we've been tasked with being stewards of this land, the town of Bassendean, for our current and future generations, and want to reflect upon the tens of thousands of years of stewardship that the Whadjuk people have had on this land and continue to provide for our community here. There aren't any announcements tonight. We do have an apology though from Councillor John Gandrew, who's unable to be here this evening. Everybody else is with us. In terms of applications for leave of absence, we have two. So Councillor Sarah Quinton has requested March 31st to April 11th, and myself Friday the 2nd of April to Sunday the 17th of April, coinciding with part of the school holidays. Are there any other applications for leave? So we have a mover for those two, Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Barty. Is there anyone against? So that is carried. Declarations of interest. Councillor Hilary McWilliam and myself as the JDAP members for item 12.2, the Bassendean Hotel, will excuse ourselves at that item as we'll be participating in the JDAP panel when that decision is made later in the coming months. Are there any other declarations of interest from councillors? Okay, great. There are no deputations or presentations tonight, so we'll move on to item 6, which is statements by members of the public on agenda items. So any members of the community present are welcome to come and speak on any of the agenda items. Just ask that you raise your hand and I'll invite you to come to the microphone. I believe, okay, Mrs. Siddell, you're welcome to come first if you'd like to come forward. As you know, you've got 3 minutes.
Predictable.
So can you just let us know which agenda item you're speaking
to?
I'm
Carol Seidel from 55 Broadway, Bassendean. I've come here basically to firstly see that the staff have made some progress on saving the trees at the hotel site, which is stated in the report to council tonight. I have some questions. So there is a lemon-scented gum in the centre section.
So
which
Ms.
has
Siddell,
been... Sorry.
Just statements at the moment. Did you have a statement on this item?
I'm going to be asking a question. Is that all right?
Well, you should really have waited to the question section, but seeing as you're up, I'll let you ask the questions now.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry to be confusing everyone. There's a lemon-scented gum tree in the centre section that has been destined for removal, only to have another tree planted in its place, according to the plans for the hotel site. Why would one take out one healthy tree, according to the arborist report, to plant another tree in its place that will take years to grow? So that's one question.
Okay, so do you know which tree you're referring to, Mrs. Siddell? Sorry?
It's not the really large gum tree, it's the next
so
one
the ones along Old Perth Road?
Yeah, but not the one closest to the pub.
Okay, so I think it might be tree number 2 on the arborist report.
It was pointed out to me at the last briefing session by Anne Copsman, who was here, that she was perplexed to why that tree should be removed.
Okay, so we'll seek to understand if the staff have any information on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's really a question for the applicant, not town staff, but in any event, the proposal involved the removal of the tree. The reason provided by the applicant is its proximity to an inspection pit, which is deemed to curtail its longevity and long-term health. I'll go back to the original point, is that it's not the town's application, it's not the town's proposal. The town is assessing it to play its role in the JDAP process, but why the applicant has chosen to remove it is a question for them to answer, but the advice that we've been provided is due to the inspection pit.
Okay, well, if you can ask more questions on that, that'd be great. The second question regarding the 2 ficus trees that are now listed to remain. Can the council request that the hotel owners do some remedial work on these trees, plus some soil coring around the base of these trees that would which have become hard because of over the course of years of cars parking under the trees? It's also recommended there should be mulching around the base of the tree, these 2 trees, plus soil improvement, and that would actually help the water absorption into the the root system of the tree. So I figure the town of Bassendean should be asking the hotel owners to, you know, do more, because if they look after those trees at the end of the day, they're going to survive for a hell of a lot more many years, and I figure it's up to us to be asking them to look after the health of those trees. That's all I've got to say.
So thanks for your question. Is there anything that you'd like to respond to?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly note the sentiment of the question, and it's broadly covered in recommended conditions 4 and 5, which deals with issues of landscaping. The fact that the applicant has acquiesced to the request to retain those trees, I suggest shows some level of commitment to them. So we're happy to have those discussions with the applicant as part of the preparation of the landscape plan.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you.
All right, so back to statements. Mr. Lehrer, I know I didn't say that exactly right, but please excuse me. You wanted to speak on item 12.3, I believe, the Casimir lease.
That's correct. My name's Jacob Lehrer. I live up on Reed Street, opposite Cyril Jackson. I've got the farm gate and the dog that's really happy to see everybody. Her name's Diva, if you want to say hello. I'm here to talk about item 12.3, the new lease, and hopefully I'm here to witness the end of something that's been stressing me out for the last 4.5 months. Casimir School is diverse, we're multicultural, community focused, and a lot of us, we came for the early childhood education and we stayed for the community. I'm a East Coast blowing, came here 12 years ago, had kids, went there because it was early, stayed there, and it provided a community for us. And I know of at least 2 families who bought in Bassendean specifically so they could walk with their children to that school. This agenda item is not asking for any more than we already have or already had, and is just asking for the commitment which was made between Casimir and the town of Bassendean previously in good faith be rectified so that it can be fulfilled. And I'd just like to thank everybody that has helped move this forward today. That's all.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak? No? Okay, so we'll move on to item 7, which is questions. Are there any further questions this evening? All right, then on to item 8, which is petitions. There are none tonight. Item 9 is confirmation of minutes. So 9.1 relates to the ordinary council meeting held on the 23rd of February 2021. Do we have a mover for 9.1A that the minutes of this meeting be received? Moved Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor McWilliam. Is there anybody against? That is carried. And 9.1B that these minutes be confirmed as a true record. We have a mover, Councillor Barty, seconded Councillor Wilson. Anybody against? That is carried. There's no business deferred from the previous meetings. We'll move on to item 11, which is the external committee reports. So we've got reports from the Wellgate East Metro Zone meeting from the 18th of February, the EMRC meeting delegates report from the 25th of February, and the Wellga State Council meeting minutes from the 3rd of March. So officer recommendation for 11.1 is the council notes these minutes. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Wilson. Is there anyone against? That is carried. So moving on to item 12, which is the reports, and 12.1, the reports to be carried on block. The reports I currently have coming out on block are 12.2, the JDAP assessment, 12.3, the Casimir lease, 12.6, the bank grant for Point Reserve, 12.8, revocation of various council policies, and 12.10, the annual budget 2021 March review. Are there any others that councillors would like out of on block? Okay, so then do we have a mover to carry the rest? Councillor Wilson moved, seconded by Councillor Barty. Is there anyone against? Great, so that is carried unanimously. So we come on to item 12.2 now. So this is the JDAP application. So Councillor Hamilton, would you like to come and take over? And Councillor William and I will excuse ourselves for this item.
Mayor, I'm not entirely sure how to correctly refer to you while you sit in that chair. I have an alternative motion that I would like to move.
Would you like to read it out?
Certainly. So the wording of the motion is that Council 1 welcomes investment in the Bassendean Town Centre and gives its support to the restoration and redevelopment works of the Bassendean Hotel. 2, reinforces its strong desire to balance town centre vibrancy with the desire to maximise tree retention on private land. 3, congratulates the applicant and town staff for their respective efforts to date to retain mature trees on site and the concessions that have already been made by the developer, resulting in the retention of the 2 large fig trees and 1 mature eucalypt. And 4, requests that staff further engage with the applicant in an effort to negotiate the retention of the remaining 2 mature eucalypt trees known as trees 2 and 4 in the arborist report.
So before we proceed, may I ask if there are any councillors who have questions of the staff?
It's been moved.
No?
We're okay.
Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Quinton? Anyone against? I declare that carried.
It's quick. Been a quick meeting. Sorry, councillors, just getting some clarification on.
So I'm just wondering whether if we can add this to this, so it's this plus this, because this endorses the officer recommendation with the following provisions.
Okay, so maybe we need to ask, do you want me to read the room again?
It might be wise.
Okay.
Sorry, councillor Wilson.
Is there a section missing from the motion?
So effectively what we have is an officer recommendation that endorses, council endorses the officer recommendation contained within the attached responsible authority report. So what is written in the paper, what we've received from councillor Wilson supplements that officer report.
But needs the original section.
So if we preface with the officer's recommendation, then followed by councillor Wilson's dot points. Yes?
Do we need to revoke it for previous motion?
I will just add your points
Yes.
to the officer recommendation, is that what we're saying?
So in other words, you're moving the officer's recommendation with these additional points.
As an amendment, yes.
Additional points to the officer's recommendation.
So it augments the officer recommendation rather than replaces it.
So I'm going to put that again, just to, for the point of clarity. So we have councillor Wilson moving the officer's recommendation with these additional points that have been read out. We have, is that appropriate for the seconder?
Yes, as long as the officer recommendation of the responsible authority report doesn't contradict anything in the new amendments.
It's only a request.
The CEO has advised that the last dot point in councillor Wilson's
additional points is only a request, so it doesn't contradict
Okay,
the original officer's recommendation.
okay.
So we have a mover and a seconder. Is there anyone against? Okay, I declare that carried. I think I can sit down now.
Okay, everyone, so 12.3, it's the new lease for the Bassendean Montessori School. Are there any questions, first of all, for the staff? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, Your Worship, I recall that my question was answered by an email of staff previously.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors with questions? Okay, in that case, we have an officer recommendation. Is someone who'd like to move the recommendation or an alternative? Councillor Wilson moving the officer recommendation, seconded by Councillor Quinton. Is there anybody against? That is carried unanimously. 12.6, the Riverbank grant from Point Reserve. Any questions to begin with? Councillor Hamilton?
I just wanted to give notice that I have an additional dot point, and I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation with my additional dot point when ready.
Okay, are there any questions before that happens? Okay, Councillor Hamilton, would you like to read out your additional dot point?
It is as per the officer's recommendation plus dot point 4, which is request the administration to additionally allocate any future, in brackets, untied monetary distributions from EMRC to the town of Bassendean to be allocated to a reserve account for this project and or Riverbank River Parks restoration works.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Do you have that? Maybe?
Yes, thank you.
Can I maybe ask Mr White for your opinion on this, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a bit open-ended. It doesn't seem to be a sort of legal date to it, and so I'm not sure how it will align with the project timing. And I guess my recommendation would be that council consider allocating funds that might be provided to us from the EMRC at the time of provision, when council will be privy to the current state of affairs, the current projects that are on course, and the current financial position of council.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the staff? Councillor Quinton?
Well then, yes, maybe drilling further into the detail of what Mr White has just said, is, or maybe if Councillor Hamilton can also clarify, because it's my understanding that monetary distributions from the EMRC can be quite large, and we wouldn't allocate all of that, would we, to one project, that we might decide that we might want to allocate funds to different projects, or have the flexibility later on to put it into playgrounds and stuff like that. So is that the kind of money that we're talking about from the monetary distributions from the EMRC? Or would you like me to?
Yeah, maybe Mr White can respond first.
Yeah.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Quinton. I guess we don't know what future monies might be allocated at this point. We don't have any information about quantum or timing, and we don't know what other projects might be considered. Council might be asked to consider at the time. So it's obviously open to council to make the resolution, but my advice would be that it would be more appropriate for
There have only been 2 distributions thus far from EMRC. One was a very large distribution for FOGO, and the second distribution was much smaller, which was untied. My memory was that was 180,000. Is that about correct by your memory?
It may have been around slightly more than that. It may have been around 240, something like that.
Okay, so reading the report from the officer regarding this Point Reserve project, clearly over 3 years the $500,000 allocation does not, the report is clear that that is only a modest amount of money for a project of that size and does not incorporate riverbank restoration works, which can be very expensive. So would you agree that if we are going to go into riverbank restoration works and other river parks restoration works, which could include playgrounds in river parks, my question is the volume of work that is required. We're looking at a 10-year plan for all of those works. We're looking at getting a 10-year plan in place. Surely a distribution from the EMRC of about $200,000 occasionally might assist in those works. Would you agree with that?
Certainly, I would have thought that any funds that the town could receive that could go towards this project would be useful for the project. And I think that's considering this project in isolation of what else might be on the agenda for council to consider at the time.
So is not sustainability and environmental initiatives, are they not stated as being very high priority in our strategic planning?
We all know that they are, Councillor Hamilton. It's not for me to debate the merits of the project. It's really for me to advise on the dry financial aspects, which I have done. I don't really have anything to add, but
Okay.
I think the rest
clearly
is for councillors to
it's
debate.
going to be an expensive project, and we should look at all possible funding sources for this project.
Okay. So just one last question. There was some comment that this was a bit open-ended, but clearly any council, any future council, at any budget process can redirect funds. This council has done that themselves in the past. So I'm assuming that with reserve funds, we can reallocate at any time, as can any future council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, so we've got an officer recommendation plus a additional point 4 from Councillor Hamilton, and she has moved. Is there a seconder for Councillor Hamilton's? Moved seconded Councillor Wilson. Is there anybody against? Okay, would you like to debate, Councillor Hamilton?
Okay. In many ways, Mr. White is correct. There are many competing projects on our horizon. However, we have a substantial number of identified projects in the river area, parks areas, wetlands areas. There's so many, I couldn't even name them all. So I think allocating these funds, and bearing in mind, this is an EMRC distribution, which may or may not happen. It might be small. I doubt that it would exceed $200,000 on an annual basis, if indeed it was an annual basis. However, what it does is directs these funds to a project. Now, this particular report already says that they're splitting the funding allocation over 3 years. Last week during the briefing, it was indicated there was potential to actually compact this project into 2 years if there were funds available. Clearly, a council in the future can redirect reserve funds, or could even stop this going to that reserve if and when they want. I think in the short term, This is an appropriate use of that money. EMRC is in the business of making our environment a better place. What better place for a distribution to go than to sustainability and environment? So I would ask councillors to please support my amendment. It's, in the long term, given the overall budget, not a great deal of money, and it will give surety to that department to move forward with some of these projects and fast track if and when they can. It may be that they won't fast track. It may be that there's not that potential there. But if we don't have the funding, then we are taking away that potential completely.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I support Councillor Hamilton's comments in their entirety. I appreciate the staff's desire not to limit our future options, but as Councillor Hamilton has pointed out, there's nothing to stop a future council from changing the purpose of any reserved funds. And I'd also point out too that should the funds potentially received from the EMRC cover the costs of the project work, then it would free up those funds that are currently earmarked for other purposes. So it would provide flexibility in other places if it did come to pass that the EMRC provided us with this funding. The works at Point Reserve are unexpected in the sense that they were not anticipated in our asset management plan and of a somewhat urgent nature. And I've noticed a strong community desire to see the town invest in the restoration of our river parks and riverbank, and I think making this decision now would provide the opportunity for the town to bring forward these works potentially in an environment where we have no long-term provision to do the works to restore the riverbank. So for all of those reasons, I support Councillor Hamilton's motion and would encourage others to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Speakers against the motion? Councillor Quinton first.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Councillor Hamilton. I do. You know, I'm one of the first people to put my hand up to say that we need to protect our environment. At the time that we receive these funds, I would like the flexibility to make that decision for this reason. If COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's that we need to be flexible. We need the opportunity to make decisions as quickly and as responsibly as possible. If, again, we are put in a position like COVID, where we're having to choose between reducing our rates or providing some financial relief to our most vulnerable in the community, or leaving a river parks project for another couple of years, I'm always going to pick the most vulnerable in our community to make sure that they are captured and cared for, as we saw last year, people not being able to pay their rates as the pandemic gripped the world. If that doesn't happen and we get this EMRC allocation, then I will be the first person and I will move a motion to put that funding into a river parks project. But we don't know what the future holds. COVID has taught us that, and we have to be careful with our money at the moment. So for that reason, I'm voting against the alternative.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Any other speakers? Councillor Barty?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would like to echo Councillor Quinton's sentiments there. I've been in council for a little over a week, and I had my portrait taken on the Point Reserve jetties. My first public photo as an elected official was in the Eastern Reporter on those jetties that days earlier had been removed. So it had taken me mere days to suffer my first political embarrassment. So no one feels the public pressure to have these have action taken at Point Reserve and have funds set aside for our riverbanks and for our parks restoration more acutely than I do. I am very excited about this motion in general. However, for me, this is a procedural matter. we simply, in the current environment, we simply cannot afford to spend funds before we know how much we have. And there will inevitably be projects and issues and crises that arise from time to time that we will require the flexibility to be able to address on the day. And I absolutely take your point on board, Councillor Hamilton, that any council can of course redirect those funds, but why would we place an additional bureaucratic hurdle in front of ourselves to address those issues and crises, when in fact, when the opportunity comes for us to dedicate, allocate additional funding towards this very important project and community value, we will have that opportunity, and there will not be an additional bureaucratic hurdle for us to jump over. So whilst I absolutely support the sentiment of the amendment, I will be voting against it for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barty. Councillor Hamilton, do you wish to speak? Or Councillor Woodley? You don't have to.
I'd like to speak for the motion. I think that the spirit of this point 4, in addition to the 3 dot points that are in the officer's recommendation, actually give a sense of the priority and the importance of this in the community, as Councillor Barty referred to, and for the council and for the environment, very importantly. I acknowledge that there has been, the recommendation includes a delegation of 150,000 in 2023, and a delegation of 200,000 in 23-24. We're totaling 500,000. This is just the beginning of the work that needs to be done in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Woodley. Councillor Hamilton, did you wish to speak again?
Yeah. First of all, a couple of points that I'd like to address. When COVID came along, all councils were at liberty to redirect their reserve funds, and most councils did that. We did that. We directed reserve funds left, right and centre to a whole host of community assistance programs and packages. And we did that in, I think, 14 days without any real bureaucratic hurdles to jump over. We did that in one meeting with a report that said this money is going from there to there, line items, bang, 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 and we all voted for it. And the administration, within 3 weeks, were rolling out all these things from the money that we had reallocated from reserves. That's how quick we reacted to COVID. So I think the COVID demonstration was that we are flexible and that reserve funds can be very quickly redirected to more urgent projects. So I would suggest to you that we did have an allocation from EMRC last year, which unfortunately didn't eventuate in a project. I would like to see this money dedicated to a specific project, but I have built flexibility into that dot point 4 by saying that it can be and or either Riverbank and River Parks restoration works over and above this project if need be. So there is flexibility in there. We used to have a River Parks committee which was dedicated to prioritising projects for all our river parks, and very little. In fact, I can't think of anything that resulted project-wise in a completed project in all the years that that River Parks project committee existed. We now have on board staff. We have good staff on board. What they need from us as councillors is money to do the job that they can do. I think that we should be, as a council, giving them surety of those funds coming forward to do the job as quickly and when they can do it. If the project is elongated, fine, then the funds can be reallocated. But if there's opportunities to fast track any of these projects, I want the funds there so that our staff can do that. Now, we don't and have never given the staff that in the past. We talk about asset renewal. We talk about having reserves to renew assets. Well, I haven't seen much happen in that area because we've never had enough funds allocated to do that in its entirety.
Councillor Hamilton, I'm going to have to ask you to finish up.
So please support this. because I think that there is flexibility in the motion.
Okay, councillor, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion with councillor Hamilton's, so that is councillor Wilson, Quinton, can't remember his name, Hamilton, McWilliam for, and against is councillor Barty and councillor McLennan, so that is carried by an absolute majority. 12.8 is the revocation of various council policies. Any questions on this? Okay, we have a mover for the officer recommendation, councillor Wilson, seconded by councillor McLennan. Is there anyone against? That is carried. And then 12.10, which is the annual budget for 2021, the March review. Again, any questions? No? We have a mover for the officer recommendation, councillor McWilliam, seconded councillor Wilson. Anybody against? That is carried unanimously. There have been no notices of motion previously given. Are there any announcements of notices of motion for the next meeting? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I have a motion that I intend to move at the next meeting. It reads, 1, Council notes that under the laws of the game, an AFL playing surface can be between 135 metres and 185 metres in length. 2, Council notes that the maximum length of a playing surface for Year 7 and Year 8 football is 140 metres. 3, Council resolves that the length of the second football oval to the west of the main oval at Jubilee Reserve be lengthened from 135 metres to 140 metres to ensure that all age groups from Year 7 through to seniors can be accommodated on the oval without the need for temporary goalposts.
Thank you, councillor Wilson. Can you provide a copy of that to
Yes.
Amy? Yes, councillor
I
Hamilton.
also have a motion.
Yes, please.
And I'm sorry, I haven't actually brought a hard copy, but I can email it to you.